Okay, everybody, why don't we get underway? Let me begin by saying good evening, everyone, and welcome to this County of Brant official plan virtual town hall session. And thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. I know there's a lot of things that compete for your time and attention, particularly on such a nice evening as we're having today. And your interest in the official plan initiative, and of course, your interest in the ongoing vibrancy and success of your community, of the county as a whole, is greatly appreciated. Some of you have heard me say this before, but I think it bears repeating. I do a fair bit of this kind of work, and it's my personal belief that people like yourselves who take time out of your busy personal and professional lives to contribute constructively to matters of civic and societal interest are always most deserving of our gratitude and respect. So thank you again for joining us, and I look forward, as I'm sure to you, to a very productive and constructive session. Now, for those of you whom I've not yet met, my name is Glenn Pache. I'm the head of a firm called GLPI, and it's my pleasure to serve as the independent facilitator for the meeting. So again, it might be important for you to know that I am not a County of Brant staff person, nor am I a member of any of the consultants who've been retained to work on the official plan or OP initiative. My role is simply to facilitate the session, and the only bias I bring to the meeting, if I can call it a bias, is toward achieving the best result for us all, and that's what I will set out to do. Now, I'll introduce a couple of others in a few minutes, but first let's talk a little bit about what it is that we're up to tonight. You'll hear more about this later, but really simply put, the County of Brant is creating a new official plan with a view to ensuring that it meets the needs of the community both today and, of course, for years to come. And the initiative will also ensure that the official plan is aligned with provincial policies and that it updates the framework for future land use in the county. Now, the OP initiative is addressing a variety of themes and topic areas. And tonight we're going to focus on sharing some preliminary policy directions in support of such things as building healthy and complete communities, managing growth and development, protecting what we value, furthering economic development and prosperity, in support of transportation and mobility, and so forth. And by the way, the county has information on these and other topics, which is available on the county's website. And you'll see this later on some of the slides, but just really quickly, it's www.brant.ca/new official plan. And again, you'll see some of this information later on some of the slides. The website includes various mechanisms, surveys, and so forth for sharing your views on a variety of topics, and I hope you will avail yourselves of those. Now, we have a number of objectives for the meeting tonight, and they're reflected in the session agenda, which is as follows, and we've got a slide that outlines the highlights for you on the right side of the slide that's on screen right now. We're obviously in the opening remarks component at the moment. In just a bit, I'll provide a little bit of information about how you can participate in tonight's online meeting, and I'll cover a few housekeeping items. I'll then invite Mayor David Bailey to share some opening observations and some additional context. I'll also introduce some of the key team members that you'll be hearing from this evening. We'll then hear from a number of County of Brant staff. They will share a presentation on the official plan initiative, and it's going to include a bunch of things, but I'll just hit some of the highlights. There'll be an overview of some of the key steps in the process that have taken place and that are upcoming, and the various engagement that has taken place to date. There'll be a description of what an OP is and what it can do for the county. There'll be a project update and notable changes for the new official plan. There'll be an overview of things that have been heard from the public throughout the process to date, and as importantly, how some some of this information has been acted upon. There will be, and this is really the heart of the evening, there will be a description of preliminary policy directions covering the types of themes and topic areas that I mentioned earlier. Again, things like building healthy and complete communities and planning for infrastructure and managing growth and so forth. And we'll also hear about some of the challenges and the opportunities and the trade-offs that need to be addressed. And at the end of the presentation segment, we'll be looking to address questions of fact or clarification on our topic. And County of Brant staff will address as many questions as there is time for this evening. We'll also outline the range of opportunities outside of this session that are available to you for providing your comments and ideas. And of course, we'll talk about next steps and where things go from here. The county, as always, is looking to stimulate an informed discussion about a number of issues, and they're very interested in hearing the community perspective. The county recognizes the importance of understanding different points of view and harnessing the best ideas from wherever they may come. Now, I'll also note that some people took the time to send some questions in advance of the meeting, and our speakers will try to address at least some of those during the presentation, and we'll also address some of them during the Q&A portion, again, following the presentation. I do want to emphasize, though, and this is important for all of us tonight, that the team will not, I repeat, they will not be addressing individual property or site-specific items this evening. Those are best left with or dealt with outside of a public forum like this. So really simply put, tonight is about updating everyone on the OP initiative, including its current status. It's about sharing things that have been heard so far as part of the process and how they've been acted upon. It's about sharing preliminary policy directions in support of a variety of themes and topic areas. It's about providing an opportunity to participate in the process by asking questions and by outlining other avenues for you to share comments. And again, we'll talk about next steps as well. So before I go on, we need to spend a couple of minutes talking about the nature of this Zoom session for those of you who are logged in through the Zoom platform. And I know that some of you have been part of, hundreds of Zoom sessions since the, COVID operating environment, but for others, this may be the first time doing so. So I need to spend a couple of minutes on a few technical details. So first of all, this session is being recorded. So I wanted to make that clear to everybody, and it's being recorded so that the content can be made available post-session to those who are unable to join us tonight, and also, of course, just to have a record of the proceedings. Now, again, for those of you who have not used Zoom, I'll briefly describe the functionality of this webinar. As an attendee, you cannot be seen or heard by us or anyone else who is participating. We will occasionally be using real-time polling to ask you questions, and throughout this webinar, please send any questions you may have by using the Q&A icon on the panel at the bottom of your device. And you see on screen right now, there's an image that will help you to find where that is. This is your primary way to engage with us during this virtual town hall. So again, during this Zoom session, questions can be submitted by using the Q&A function. And again, the image on screen will help you find them depending on the type of device that you're using. For those of you who may not have capability to see the Zoom Q&A function, questions can also be sent to the Brant Official Plan email address, which is, and I'll repeat it twice, officialplan@brant.ca. So again, that is officialplan@brant.ca. So again, there are two ways to share questions, through the Zoom Q&A and through email to officialplan@brant.ca. Our moderators, our question moderators, are monitoring both the Zoom Q&A and the email address, and they will be queuing the questions to be put to our responder panel during the Q&A part of this webinar. If you have any technical issues, write to us using either the Q&A icon, or if you don't have access to that, you can email, and again, I'll repeat this twice, Gary, that's Gary, .porter, that's PORTER, at brant.ca. So again, Gary.porter at brant.ca. And the technical professional, if you are encountering any issues, will try to assist you. And by the way, you can adjust the size of your presentation screen or the speaker screen by simply hovering over the line between the two. You should see a toggle bar, and you can just move that bar left and right, and it'll adjust the relative size of the images. Now, for those of you who have chosen to dial into the meeting, in other words, you are using a simple non-web enabled phone. So just an old simple phone, right? It is not computer or web enabled. You'll be able to listen to the presentation, but not share any questions unless, again, you have separate access to the email I mentioned. For anyone as an observer, joining as an observer through the live stream on Facebook, your option for sending questions to the team or answering some of the upcoming poll questions is also through that email address, which again is officialplan@brant.ca. And if you're following the presentation using a hard copy of it or a non-active Zoom version, our presenters will occasionally reference some of the slide titles and slide page numbers so that you can follow along. So I know I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating. If you have questions about anything you're hearing in the presentation, or perhaps that's not in the presentation, but related to our thematic topic area, please forward them through the Zoom Q&A or send them to officialplan@brant.ca as they occur to you. That's really important. Don't wait until the end of the presentation. Send them as they occur to you, because again, our question moderator will be consolidating like questions and trying to put things together. So send them as they occur to you. If due to time constraints, your question is not addressed this evening, be assured that it will be considered by County of Brant staff, and it will be documented and so forth and received as part of the OP initiative. And more information will be forthcoming and posted online. Now, I know that we have a number of our esteemed elected officials who are joining us this evening. I will not try to name them all. I will thank them for attending and for their interest in our topic. And just before I introduce the Brant staff who are members of the project team, I will invite Mayor David Bailey to share some observations and additional context. Mayor Bailey, please go ahead, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. First of all, Glenn, thank you for helping us out tonight. You've been here 1 or 2 times and you certainly sound like you know exactly what you're doing. So thank you very much for coming and spending your time with us tonight too. I can tell everyone on this call that it's very exciting to be the mayor or on council at this point in the history of the County of Brant. Trying to obviously maintain all the good things about the County of Brant that made people want to live here and want to stay here. Well, looking into the future, it's very exciting to see us tweak policies and change things. And it's very exciting to see the difference in the future, the near future during policy. And it's so good to know that we are supported by an amazing group of staff that are taking their jobs very seriously and are being very responsible into the future of the County of Brant and the policies and the activities they do to maintain well, the way the county is going to look in the next few years. So it's very tricky business to, as I said, maintain what we love about the county, yet we have to tweak it, we have to get on board, and we have to do a very careful balancing act to bring us into the future. So thank you to the staff. I know there's a couple of councillors here. I'm sure they all would be here if they could be here. There's a lot of interest at the Horseshoe, and we're very grateful for the time the staff has put into it to get us to this point. So thank you. And Glenn, I'll be here in the wings listening to everything you say.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor Bailey. And I know some of you are always interested in the numbers who are part of this. We're roughly at about 35 attendees at the moment, and we'll expect that that number will likely grow as we continue this evening. Let me take a moment now to introduce the staff team that many or that you may be hearing from this evening. It depends on the types of questions that are being asked. You'll hear from them either as presenters of information or again as responders to your questions. And I'll invite them to quickly just say hello so that you can put a face to the name as I introduce them. And I'll begin with Pam Dusling, who is the General Manager of Development Services. And actually, Pam, I know you wanted to share a few words of welcome before I introduce the rest of the team. So please go ahead now.
Thanks very much, Glenn. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the meeting this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. I know it's a beautiful evening out there, but as General Manager for Development Services, I'm here to bring hello and welcomes, and also just identify that this is the most important development document for the County of Brant. It really shapes how the County of Brant will move forward in terms of growth and building and development in the future. So your comments or participation are very welcome. And I would also like to very much thank Jessica and Brandon and Michelle, and especially Jennifer, our policy planning team, for all of the work on the official plan, and also some of the behind the scenes people, Nicole and Gary tonight. So thank you, everyone, and I'm looking forward to all the comments.
Thanks, Pam. So you just heard some of those names. Let me be a little more formal and introduce them for you now. And again, I'll invite them to just turn their videos on so that you can quickly put a face to the name. We have Jennifer Boyer, who is the Manager of Policy Planning. Jennifer is also the Project Manager for the OP. Jennifer?
Well, thanks very much, Glenn. Thank you, everyone. I'm Jennifer, and thank you for being here tonight. We look forward to this presentation.
Thank you. And we have Michelle Schafel, who is an environmental planner. Michelle, I think you were.
Sorry. Good evening, everybody. Very excited to be here and creating a new official plan.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. And we have Brandon Courtleave, who is a planner.
Good evening, everyone. Looking forward to a good session tonight and some good feedback after this. So looking forward to it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And we have Jessica Kitchen, who is also a planner with the county.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Glenn. I'm excited to be here, and hopefully we can get some great feedback and have some good discussion.
Great, thank you. So given that time is of the essence, let's begin with some core context setting information. We'll then get into some greater depth about the new OP and some of the preliminary policy directions across that range of topic areas and themes that I mentioned earlier. And you'll be hearing from various county planning staff, but we're actually going to begin with Jessica Kitchen, who will kick things off before handing things to her various colleagues. And as a reminder, as questions occur to you, please do send them in through either the Zoom Q&A function or by email to officialplan@brant.ca. And for those of you who have joined us in progress, and I know some of you have, again, my name is Glenn Pache. I have the privilege tonight of serving as the independent facilitator for the session. So Jessica, I will invite you to kick things off. Take it away, please.
Thank you, Glenn. Reflecting back on the new official plan project, this project was initiated back in 2019, which involved the development of the 7 key strategic topics. And we'll look to get into those with you a bit shortly throughout the presentation. In early 2020, we introduced the project to council, and in the fall of the same year, we began engagement with the community. And this was largely through online surveys, targeted mail outs throughout the County of Brant, launching our project website, as well as Engage Brant, and hosting similar events to this evening's event. So through phase 2 of the project, we began to summarize what we heard throughout the early stages. Next slide. And so which brings us to where we are now and where we'll be heading next. So the preliminary findings of the County of Brant's residential and employment land needs analysis were brought forward early this year in March and April. And based on this analysis, along with the provincial policy statement and growth plan, we were able to develop preliminary policy directions, which we've brought forward to Council actually just last Thursday, June 10th, through a special meeting. And this evening, we are looking and hopefully going to receive some great feedback from the community on these preliminary policy directions. And this will help and assist us in the next step of creating a new draft official plan. And we're hoping to bring a version of this forward to Council in July on the 29th through another special meeting. And hopefully once we table that document, we'll send it off to the province for review through a one window 90-day approach. Next slide. So the new official plan will provide the framework to establish a long-term vision for the County of Brant that fosters a sustainable approach to future residential and economic growth. And it will target to the year 2051. So it is a long-range plan, 30 years out that we're planning for. And this includes providing policies that will help with phasing and staging and management of growth and development throughout the County of Brant. It will also look to assist with allocation of growth and support opportunities for intensification throughout the county, and provide a comprehensive land use system as well, which will look to include goals like well-designed transportation, good infrastructure planning, and protection of agricultural lands, and that's really just to name a few. Next slide. So by now you might be wondering what will change just based on the current official plan. The new official plan will be significantly updated to reflect the most recent provincial policies. Our current official plan was approved back in 2010. So we are due for an update, and there has been many changes at the provincial level as well and throughout the county that we need to work to reflect in our new comprehensive document. The new official plan will provide a new land use planning framework, clear policy direction for settlement areas, redefined mapping, clear delineation of the county's agricultural systems, natural heritage systems, and open space network. It will also include strong policies on Indigenous community engagement and reconciliation. Next slide. So you may also be wondering what policy directions actually are. Preliminary policy directions provide a vision for the writing of the new official plan. We take what the province says we must do, undertake a county-based analysis through the Municipal Comprehensive Review on our specific needs, and incorporate our unique goals, visions, and values, and of course, community feedback through events like this evening. And that all helps to compile and create the new County of Brant official plan. Next slide. There have been obstacles which we as a team have faced with respects to initial engagement strategy. We had to rework our initial engagement strategy, largely in part and due to the ongoing pandemic, COVID-19. But we have actually been able to very successfully engage with the community as well as stakeholder groups. And that's largely been through virtual and online and social media platforms, of course, just due to the ongoing restrictions. The results of this engagement were actually very, very successful and a bit surprising at first, but very pleasing. Through a staff report to Council on December 1st, 2020, we were able to compile much of the information and feedback that we had received through the first phases of engagement in question and answer summaries, which specifically comprised all of the first front end of the project. And much of this showed that through our surveys that were released, we had respondents that were engaged throughout different topics, more so than others. Our respondent ranged from 57 at points to 228 responses to different surveys. And the majority of the responses were with regards to building healthy and complete communities. So that was very interesting. And some of the other survey topics that we did release were growth management, how we green, and planning for infrastructure. Next slide. So this seems like a great time to take a quick pause and launch our first live poll with our Zoom attendees this evening. So the questions should pop up in front of you on your screen, and you will have a few seconds to fill out and answer and complete the survey, and it'll be submitted and we'll read out the results live. If you are viewing this event through Facebook or YouTube, the poll question is up on the slide in front of you, and the feedback can be given via email to officialplan@brant.ca. And for those who may be listening via phone this evening, the question actually is, what is your #1 goal for the new official plan to address about growth and development in the County of Brant? And so again, please provide feedback to the email address officialplan@brant.ca. We will be monitoring that live this evening, and also all team members monitor it daily. So feedback is much appreciated through that avenue. And we'll just give a few more seconds here for the polls to close. Perfect. All right. So very interesting. So we're seeing here that 33% of the attendees this evening on Zoom answered all of the above. Also, we're seeing that much of the Zoom audience answered slowing and managing growth as a response. We also had infrastructure planning at 23%. And we had preservation and protection of the county's identity, pardon me, at 10%. And we had employment growth at 7%. There was also the response for improved transportation as well. So overarching 33%, all of the above. Alrighty, so I'm going to pass it over now to our Manager of Policy Planning, Jennifer Boyer, and she will help to kick this evening off by going through some of our policy direction overview.
All right, thanks so much, Jess, and thanks everyone again for being here. So I've got about a few slides, but my topic is growth management for tonight. And a lot of you tonight have heard this a lot in the last year about growth management. But the first slide is really about what we've heard from the community. As Jessica mentioned, we did a lot of surveys and feedback, but it's also in response to all of our conversations we've had from everyone from council themselves, also in terms of the development community, the community at large, and not just focusing on Paris or St. George or one specific area, but the entire county. But growth management is a top priority for the County of Brant, not only in people's minds, but also it's the #1 strategic priority for this term of council as well. And usually when people think about growth management, it's all about houses or controlling, how fast things grow, but it's actually also about jobs and employment, because that's also a #1 priority of the county, is maintaining economic growth and also having jobs available for people that actually live here, and to also harness fiscal responsibility and also opportunities for the county. But one of the things that residents were concerned about, again, it was county-wide, not just in specific areas, was really, as you saw in the poll, it was about infrastructure planning, having those services available as we grow, affordable and attainable housing options for all ages and income levels, whether they be rental or ownership, and also how we design our communities, what they're going to look like. And again, as I said, having jobs available in the community. But also we really wanted the feedback we've heard is also protecting our agriculture, our countryside, our natural heritage. The environment is, as you'll hear from my colleague Michelle, is also a very top priority for the county and the residents and our council. So next slide, please. So again, many of you have seen this. We've brought several reports to council just about our growth forecasting. And for those of you who don't know, the county is sitting at about 41,000 people. It'll be interesting to see the census that comes out later this year and the results. We're targeting about 41,000 at this time. But with the growth plan that the province has laid out, the county is expected to grow over a 30-year horizon to 59,000 residents. The original growth plan only went to 2041, but now we have an extra 10 years to get there, which is very important because this is not just a 10-year plan or a 20-year plan. It's actually now 30 years, so we can sort of move it out over that time. But let's not forget about the jobs. Growth also is about providing jobs, and the county also has a forecasting amount about jobs and employment opportunities that we also have to meet, and that's also part of growth management. And as you've seen around the county, there is a lot of development going on, and we do have a lot of development applications and subdivisions, and we do have a lot of things that are already approved, as you've seen, that are being built. And we're expecting a certain amount of growth to 2031 in terms of development that's already, as they say, in the pipeline. And you can see by some of those numbers that, Paris is obviously having a lot of growth, but we also do have a lot happening in our rural countryside. There are houses being built and people are taking up on business opportunities. A lot of businesses are expanding, which is good to see. So that's all included in our forecasting. Next slide. So again, one of the things about managing growth, and it doesn't matter what type of municipality you are, if you're looking at massive expansion of your urban lands or just different types of ways of managing the different types of developments, it's just called growth management, and that's the exercise municipalities have to go through. But there's different ways that different municipalities have to look at that forecasting and decide on how they are going to do that. So we crunch the numbers in the background, we do a technical analysis, and what we come up with is actually looking at, are we going to expand our boundaries or not? You've probably heard a lot around the Greater Golden Horseshoe. A lot of these municipalities, especially in York Region and Durham, Halton, they're dealing with some significant boundary expansions up to thousands of hectares, and those are some of the things municipalities have to do to understand how to manage and where to put the growth. So one of the things is either you can manage, you can limit the expansions, but you also have to deal with designing your subdivisions and also the way employment opportunities work, where you're going to put those lands, but also looking at the types. Do you build up? Do you build out? You've heard those terms before, the height, the sprawl. So these are all things municipalities have to decide about how they can manage growth. Do you have higher density? Do you take opportunities to look at brownfields and sites that aren't being utilized to put different types of housings? So those are all the different toolkits that we have in our toolbox, the different types of things that we can do to manage growth. Next slide. So one of the things that have come up a lot is what is density and what is intensification and what is the difference? So one of the things that the county is recommending is a slightly higher density target, which is up to 50 people or residents and jobs per hectare, and also our intensification rate, which is sitting at 15%, but we're looking at 20%. Usually the intensification, which Paris is already taking a lot of opportunities, especially using in underutilized sites, changing the different types of units that are available. You'll see some duplexes being built or different multi-unit tenants, which provide some rental options for people. But I guess intensification is really an opportunity where you can look at a change or use of a property on a site to actually add additional residential units. And as I said, Paris is meeting well beyond the 20% because there's some really interesting projects that people are utilizing, and they take advantage of the existing infrastructure. The density is a little bit different. It actually looks at the residents in the area and the jobs. So on new subdivisions, we look at how they're designed And you'll see actually when you buy a house, you look at the walkability score that a lot of houses are being listed at. And that's actually part of the whole density framework in complete communities. So those are some of the things that density does and the types of housing choices that will allow it and how they're designed. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we've already looked at, a potential that we're going to increase the intensification target slightly, and also the density target, as I mentioned in the previous slide, which helps us actually manage growth. Next slide. So this is just actually an example, if you know Paris well, just to give you an example of what density means. This is a neighborhood density profile just actually on the south side of the river. We've got actually Grand River Street North, we've got Dundas Street. So if you know that neighborhood well, you can actually do a calculation of the types of houses that are there, the types of jobs, the types of dwelling units. You can see some examples of actually what's actually there. It was an interesting exercise, especially when Brandon walked around and took some photos about the types of singles and semis and rows and duplexes, because it's more of a historical neighborhood. So it was quite a good exercise to determine that there's actually 52 people and jobs per hectare in that area. And I just want to note out that it says 310 jobs, but it's actually based on the type of building and uses that are available there, and the ability to create different types of opportunities based on their zoning and the availability of businesses in the area. Next slide. Here's actually another example that's actually in Paris at Dumfries and Dundas Street West. Another example of actually how a neighborhood is planned, and you can actually see that's actually 52 people and jobs per hectare. And it's got quite a mix of singles and semis, but it's also got some sort of mid-rise, a few stories high, and the calculation of residents and actually jobs and dwelling units was pretty good to understand that we actually came out to the total of 52. So that's an example of sort of that density target around 50 that already exists in the county right now. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there's a whole bunch of different ways that the county has to look at growth management. And some of the things that we presented to council last week at the special meeting for policy directions was actually looking at the opportunity for more employment lands. The county does have a shortfall. And in terms to meet our forecasting for the 2051 horizon, we actually do need further employment lands. And there was a lot of talk with council and also some delegations about the ability to go beyond our need and to look at the 403 area as a priority area for strategic lands for employment lands. So we're reviewing a lot of proposals, and some of them are expanding the boundary for employment lands down in that area, and Brandon will get into some more detail later. Some of the other things we're looking at the smaller settlement areas is to limit expansions for other areas where there is limited need for large scale development. And that includes areas, especially like Paris and St. George for residential lands, but also Mount Pleasant and Oak Hill for major expansions, just based on servicing and the needs into the future. Next slide. And one of the things we have is we actually have excess lands of residential lands that are not slated for development to 2051. And those lands, are not currently eligible for development. And those are some ways to manage growth. And also in terms of directing development that we provide, protect our rural areas, and also for adequate servicing. So one of the things that we're planning to do at the end of this official plan is to have a growth management strategy, but also have with it an ability to understand the servicing allocation that goes with that. So the infrastructure is in place for the developments that will be slated to 2051. So the county understands how that growth can be managed. Next slide. All right, we're going to have another poll question. I think this is a great time to take a break. So the question is, for everyone, how should the new official plan address growth and development in the County of Brant? And we have a bunch of questions, and I actually have to put on my glasses. A phased growth that can consider infrastructure needs, strong alignment with other corporate plans, such as transportation master plan or master servicing, strong protection of the environment and agriculture, tools for more comprehensive community design, or all of the above. So we'll give just a couple minutes there. And again, if anyone is watching on Facebook or other platforms, we are available via email, as Glenn said, at officialplan@brant.ca. And you're welcome to send in questions. So we will just give this another minute for everyone. All right, this is, again, pretty interesting. There is the majority of respondents, or almost half, 45%, said all of the above, which is very important for the growth management strategy. But the biggest one is like a phase type of growth. And then also strong protection of the environment and agriculture also got quite a few votes, 18%. And also to have the tools for more comprehensive community design. So excellent, thank you everyone. And I will turn it over to our next presenter.
And Jennifer, just before we go there, it's Glenn here. Some people are always interested in knowing how many people actually contributed or completed the poll. We had about 30 for the first question and about 33 for the second, and our number of attendees now is up around 40. So that's terrific. Thank you, Jennifer. Let's go to our next presenter.
Thanks, Glenn. So just building on the growth management policy directions, we'll continue with building healthy and complete communities. Again, this seemed to be quite a hot topic of discussion when we were going through the early phases of engagement with the community, so that's appreciated. As mentioned, the feedback collected and reviewed for this one, what we've heard, and we did hear you, and we're happy to read some of the high level and very common responses for you this evening of what we actually did hear. Some of this was in regards to more active transportation methods, so having to use a vehicle less to travel around and throughout communities or the County of Brant. Including a diverse range and mix of housing options, including affordable and attainable housing. This was a very important piece, and it continues to be a very important piece moving forward for building healthy and complete communities. Having appropriate mixes of housing, equitable housing to meet all ages, all incomes, is extremely important as we continue to move forward, and of course, as we continue to experience growth. When looking at higher density, it was interesting. It showed that there was a want for a mix and a range of housing and density and intensification, as well as a range of mix of uses. But respondents were very particular about kind of setting a limit to the height, and that was right around 4 stories in height seemed to be the extent of what residents seemed to come back to us with through the surveys. And when we were looking at servicing and having amenities in close proximity, a mix of uses throughout the community with also some green space, these are all important elements of building healthy and complete communities. So we were happy to hear that feedback and to share it with you this evening. Complete and convenient communities is also a large goal of building healthy and complete communities. So making sure that communities and neighborhoods are walkable. And it's very interesting when looking at some of those examples that Jennifer shared for density and our existing neighborhoods. Some of those are already modeling the built healthy and complete community form at this particular time, and they were developed years ago. So it's very interesting as we continue to move forward to look back as well. Next slide. So our focus through the new official plan will be on creating strong, complete communities, and that will largely be modeled in our policy framework that we'll look to bring forward in detail in July. And we can accomplish this through different implementation tools. Some of those are intensification targets and tracking. So just keeping track of where we're at as far as, are we reaching our targets that the province has given us? Why or why not? What can we do to improve upon that as we continue forward? Design guidelines for infill development as well. Also, we can build design guidelines for greenfield development and heritage conservation areas. And of course, a new comprehensive zoning bylaw is also a common tool that I'm sure many people are familiar with. These are just a few of the tools that we can use to build healthy and complete communities. There are many that we have in our toolbox, like Jen mentioned. And aligning with other plans is extremely important. So there's been a ton of work that has been undertaken as our team continues to work on completing and building a new official plan. So some of those plans are the Mayor's Housing Partnership Task Force Affordable Housing Action Plan, as well as the Housing Master Plan. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan was one that was just recently completed. And the Age-Friendly Community Plan continues to be worked on as well. So ensuring that we align closely in our policy direction with plans and projects that have already been undertaken during our process is extremely important to make sure that we reflect all of the county's goals and initiatives and objectives. So it's important our new official plan reflect all of these goals, objectives, and values, and make sure that we take into account all feedback from the community at all different points in the project. And that's really what this evening's about. And on that note, I think I've chatted enough about building healthy and complete communities. So I am going to throw it over to my colleague, Michelle Schafel. She is our environmental planner on the policy team, and she'll chat more about protecting what we value.
Thank you, Jessica. I'll be talking about protecting what we value and how we green, two very related topics. Throughout consultation on the official plan, key themes have emerged from the public on protecting what we value. We heard our residents are proud of our rural character and that it is part of our identity. We were asked during one of the open houses in the fall, what will the county do to become an environmental leader? Many concerns have also been raised about better protection for cultural heritage resources. We heard that we need clear and concise policies. We heard that we need to go beyond the minimum standards of the province, especially when it comes to protecting the environment. We heard that we need permanent protection of our natural areas. We need to grow the tree canopy and set targets. A minimum target of 30% has been recommended by members of the public. Protecting drinking water and our water resources is also important. I met earlier this year with the Six Nations on growing the Greenbelt, and I heard that protection of the Grand River is essential for their safe drinking water. Next slide, please. We also heard about preserving our farmland and the importance of that. The agricultural system is already highly fragmented, and we need to protect what remains from incompatible uses. We heard in discussions with the Six Nations and the Mississaugas people that they want to be engaged and they want to build positive working relationships with the county. We heard that they want to be involved in protection of the environment and our cultural heritage resources. We also heard that the county needs to work with these communities on creating an archaeological management plan that identifies archaeological resources and how to protect them, as well as engagement procedures going forward. We heard from the public that we need to create inviting public spaces for enjoyment throughout the county, both our urban and rural areas. We received many comments on ensuring that any new development is compatible with heritage buildings. So looking at the urban design and that the form and function are compatible. We also heard that the county should promote the preservation and adaptive reuse of heritage buildings. Next slide, please. So what can we do to protect what we value? I found that developing clear policies is essential to protecting what we value. The use of using wording such as shall, as opposed to where feasible, could make a big difference. My experience working in the industry over the years is that most people want to protect what we value, but they want to know the rules. It creates a fair and a transparent process. As part of protecting the agriculture system, staff are mapping a comprehensive agriculture system that will clearly distinguish between prime agricultural lands and rural lands. We can create policies to ensure that uses are related to agriculture and on-farm diversified uses. We can create policies that direct incompatible uses such as commercial and industrial to settlement areas. We can prevent further fragmentation by directing new residential lots to rural clusters and settlement areas. As part of the official plan, staff are also mapping a natural heritage system, which will include natural areas, water resources, minimum vegetation protection zones, and linkages between these systems, features to create a connected system. We can set targets based on how much habitat is enough. It's a science-based document created by Environment Canada. We can also create policies that only permit compatible uses such as conservation, forest management, and recreation. In terms of creating desirable public spaces, one tool that can be used is an arts, culture, and heritage strategy. In terms of protecting our heritage resources, such as concentrations in our downtown areas, one of the best tools is under the Ontario Heritage Act related to establishing heritage conservation districts. The county is in the process of developing a cash in lieu bylaw for parkland, which will enhance the county's open space system. As I said, staff have been meeting with Six Nations and the Mississaugas people to develop a positive working relationship, such as having discussions on protecting drinking water, how best to engage them, and how to protect important resources. Next slide, please. So a lot of what we have talked about tonight is related to climate change and how we green. For example, restricting settlement boundary expansions will prevent urban development in our rural areas. Developing complete communities will promote active transportation, and the permanent protection of natural heritage areas and rural areas will contribute to cleaner air and water, reduce flood risks, and mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. We heard from residents that they're very concerned about climate change and that they want a county-led strategy on what we'll do. We heard residents are worried about increased risks to life and property due to increasing extreme weather events. We heard we need to do more to improve water and energy conservation, air quality, managing waste such as providing composting opportunities, as well as providing options for renewable energy. We also heard that the county should be a leader through an example by setting an example through projects such as low impact development. Next slide, please. So what can we do to combat climate change? The county, as I've said, we're already doing a lot through recently this month, we are looking at a better tree conservation bylaw to protect our natural areas. In terms of hazardous lands, we need to direct life and property away from flooding and erosion hazards, have clear mapping and clear policies. We are looking to modernize the special floodplain policy areas in downtown Paris. Downtown Paris, due to the location of the Nith River and the Grand River, it is located in a floodplain and it is high risk due to flood flows and velocities. So as these policies were created in 1987, we need to make sure that they are doing what they're intended to do, which is to protect life and property. The area does contain, it's full of beautiful historic buildings with great opportunities for shopping, dining, and recreation. It's a very scenic area with the rivers and lots of opportunities for open space. Special policy areas were initially created by the province to recognize that we do have historical areas that were created in our downtown cores that were developed before floodplain policies. And the intent is to allow for minor development and minor alterations. If you look at the provincial policy and the criteria, due to the hazardous nature, they are not meant for new or intensified development, the focus being on the protection of life and property. Staff are working with GRCA and as well as the Ministry of Natural Resources to obtain advice on how to best move forward in the special policy area. As part of comprehensive planning, watershed and sub-watershed planning are very important to protecting the quality and quantity of water, which also includes our drinking water. The county can develop sustainable guidelines on green buildings, low impact development, and green infrastructure. We can create volunteer as well as mandatory requirements as part of the building process. The county can create policies that support provision and the acquisition of a well-connected public open space system. So if these lands are, say, if they're acquired through the development process, they provide for permanent protection of the natural environment. They can provide opportunities for recreation and a connected trail system throughout the county. Thank you very much. And I will now turn it over to Brandon to finish off tonight's presentation.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. Just move the slide forward here. So I'm going to be chatting about a couple different topics. We'll be starting with economic development and prosperity. So a very important topic here in the county. What we kind of heard from our engagement was that county residents expressed a very keen interest in both living and working here in the county of Brant, which is something that our economic development staff are exploring with their various initiatives. And it's something that we'll be putting into this new official plan to support those with policies as well. Throughout the engagement process, residents and stakeholders expressed interest in strengthening and diversifying our economy, focusing more on our agricultural sector, considering better options for commuters, whether they're coming or going to the county of Brant, and taking advantage of the great access that we have to the 403, as well as working to enhance small business opportunities too. Concerns were raised about things like traffic, providing proper servicing for business growth, providing better internet, especially in our rural areas, and maintaining the overall character of the county of Brant when it comes to employment and job growth. Our new official plan is going to create policy foundations for these types of things, and the implementation tools that come afterwards will address these concerns and really strengthen the economy of the county. So what kind of implementation tools are we looking at? Well, we'll use our land use policies of the official plan to encourage a wide variety of business growth, while ensuring that we help reduce any potential land use or environmental conflicts. So that means we want to make sure that the businesses coming into the county have our best interests in mind, as well as have a positive effect on their surroundings. Things like noise, odor, parking, drinking water protection, and the protection of farmland are key elements that we'll be putting into our official plan. And overall, the implementation of these improved policies will continue to be spearheaded by our friends in our Strategic Initiatives Department. And we're working very closely with them as they implement the Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan. We'll be considering future tools too, like a Strategic Employment Land Reserve that may put some land aside for future servicing and future employment growth, as well as continuing various community improvement programs to invest in the county of Brant. So as Jen mentioned when she was talking about growth management, one of the key analyses done with this project has been an employment areas land needs analysis. So we've looked at how much land is kind of already designated for employment areas, considering past policies and then past, current, and future growth. We've determined that we need some more employment lands to meet our growth targets to the year 2051. We've also received a number of requests from landowners who have an employment designation on their land and would like to convert it to something else, for example, a residential growth. But based on our analysis and knowing that we have that shortfall, these types of conversions would create a further shortfall of the land and will not be recommended to council as we move forward with our official plan in the draft. We are exploring options for our employment growth here in the county, especially in community areas, adding in mixed use permissions, employment areas by servicing more land for employment growth, and in our rural areas as well by supporting especially the agricultural economy in our small towns and villages with the existing businesses in those areas. So we are also exploring options for employment growth by adding more land into the settlement boundary in Paris. So this addition of lands would be for employment uses only. The intention would be to take that shortfall and add land into it so we have enough for future growth. We've also focused mostly on the Highway 403 corridor, and you'll see several options here on this slide. The map shows several options that are being considered through portion of the review. We'll also be considering criteria like the impact on farmland, the surrounding uses, natural areas, and the cost to provide services to these lands as we move forward. So speaking of the Highway 403, transportation is also a very big topic in the County of Brant, and the new OP will be coordinating the anticipated growth with our transportation infrastructure needs. So as we continue to engage with residents, we've been asked to think more about climate change resilience when it comes to transportation, improving things like street design and safety, and considering the importance of safe, direct, and separated active transportation infrastructure. So that's things like bike trails or multi-use paths, and considering them as an alternate form of transportation to the car, as well as a recreational form of transportation. So our new OP has been coordinating directly with the Transportation Master Plan. That's being completed currently at the same time as the official plan through our operations department. And we're going to be looking at Complete Communities framework with that to coordinate those the findings of that study directly into our official plan as well. So we'll be looking at things like cross sections of streets to set design standards, encourage street safety, maybe things like street trees, benches, things like that. Traffic calming that would come into play as well in that. Looking at options beyond simply planning for the automobile. We'll also be working with our strategic initiatives folks as they continue to explore accessible and equitable transit options. For example, Brant Transit, as we've seen that take off in recent years. So transportation infrastructure is a large piece of our infrastructure considerations here in the county, but residents have told us they want improvements to things like traffic congestion, bypass options or planning, and we're looking at other infrastructure concerns as well. Beyond just transportation. So things like stormwater management and water and wastewater capacity. Development depends directly on the infrastructure. That's an important point. So this official plan will tie directly into the implementation of a number of master plans that are going on right now around servicing, and will help better coordinate our growth overall. Plans like the master servicing plans for Paris and Burford, the water and wastewater class environmental assessments for Haynesville and St. George, they're all looking at servicing in those areas, and we're going to use the foundation of the official plans policies to help inform when and where growth can occur in the county. And as Jen mentioned, with the growth management strategy and phasing of development, that will tie in directly into that as well. One of the things we also have to consider is agreements with our neighbors. So for shared infrastructure, there's a lot of kind of coordination happening, and we want to make sure that any infrastructure developments are sustainable and cost effective in a way that really does benefit the County of Brant. That type of thing, we may not see a lot of the infrastructure. Some of it might be underground, hidden away, but it really does impact how we create complete communities, especially creating complete communities that are unique to the County of Brant. That itself is one of the overall objectives of our new official plans policies. That we would want to ensure that our growth and development fits in with the identity of our county. And we're really excited to keep that at the kind of forefront of this particular project as we keep it rolling. And we'd love to hear more from the public about your questions and concerns about all of these topics that we've kind of discussed this evening. And there'll be lots more information coming forward. We'll cover that shortly, but I'll hand it over to Glenn to continue our evening, and we'll take some questions from the audience.
Great. Thanks very much, Brandon. And thank you to all of our speakers for the very informative overview presentation. And thank you to all of you for participating in tonight's session, both for your interest in the topic and for the questions that have already been provided. For those of you who may have joined us in progress, and I know that's a number of you again, you've been listening to County of Brant planning staff as they've taken us through some core information. My name is Glenn. I'm serving as the independent independent facilitator for the session. Just a reminder again, for those who may have missed this at the beginning, the way for you to send in questions in this particular webinar is through the Q&A function through Zoom, or by sending questions by email to officialplan@brant.ca. So don't raise your hands electronically and so forth. That's not the way to engage with us this evening. So let's move now to the Q&A component part of the session. As questions have been submitted, staff have been reviewing them with a view to identifying those that are similar in nature and with a view to addressing any duplication. In some cases, they may have been consolidating multiple questions into a single one. So please don't worry if the questions posed this evening aren't exactly as you may have asked them. And again, there may not be time to address all of the questions, but county staff will be reviewing them and they will be documented as input to the initiative. So let's get to the questions now. Someone is asking, and Jennifer, maybe this one best goes to you. They are saying, as a preliminary direction is to create more opportunities for more mixed areas, will Canesville and other settlement areas be considered for residential uses? Jennifer, your response?
All right, thanks very much, Glenn. That's a good question. I think I saw it on the Q&A. So in terms of, let's say Canesville specifically, Canesville is one of our secondary settlement areas, and right now it's got some servicing constraints, but the Class EA for water and wastewater is ongoing. And we also have to acknowledge that we've got a agreement, the Brant-Brantford Boundary Adjustment Agreement, which limits some servicing options for Canesville for the existing uses, which focuses on IC&I and employment lands. But Canesville is going to go with the Class E in terms of a visioning exercise, because I know in terms of Colburn Street itself, there's actually some commercial along there and things like that. And so the county's looking at Colburn Street specifically because there are some businesses there and a lot of potential for infill and changes of use of that. So I think that's what the question was directed to. I think I know who asked the question, so hopefully that helps.
Jennifer, let's continue with you. There's a question about employment lands. Somebody has said that they have heard that there is a shortage of employment lands within the county, and they're wondering, will we need to add more land to accommodate employment growth? And if so, where would those lands be located?
All right, thanks, Glenn. Well, the presentation touched upon a little bit about that. We talked about the employment lands and the actual employment growth and the forecasting amount that the county has to achieve by 2051 in terms of jobs. And in terms of our employment land needs, Brandon highlighted that. As we said, we have a shortfall of actual employment lands sort of in our urban settlement areas, and there was a slide about that in terms of where the county is looking at opportunities and to actually put those employment lands, especially for prestige priority lands, and that's around the 403 Rest Acres corridor. So the presentation last week at council, there's a lot of talk on that in terms of looking at those opportunities, not missing those opportunities. For those lands. So the county's evaluating, the staff are evaluating those proposals that have come in and looking beyond our need and talking to the province about that to see how much we can designate in that area. So hopefully that helps.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Maybe I'll go to Jessica with this next one, or you might want to jump in as well, Jennifer. There are a few questions around infrastructure keeping pace with growth. And so people are asking, has the need for additional primary and secondary schools to accommodate the growth in residences that's coming been addressed? Or what about the need for municipal facilities, whether they be sports facilities, recreation facilities, or other? How are those things being accounted for and accommodated? So again, I don't know if that's Jessica and or Jennifer who wants to kick us off on that one.
Thanks, Glenn. I can start with the school facilities one, because that's a specific planning tool, so I can try that. So in terms of school board planning, they're one of our stakeholders that we engage with the official plan, but the school boards themselves have their own planning and their own forecasting horizon. So they look at the actual communities that are going to be built based on our forecasts. And what happens with new developments is sites are reserved for schools and they are their own entity in terms of planning. The new developments reserve sites for them and they have a certain time horizon stamped on them, whether they'll need them or not, and they have to accommodate a certain amount of students. So it's a bit beyond the municipality's control at a certain point. But what the county can do, especially with complete communities, is we have to look at different types of policies to allow the walkable neighborhoods. In the county themselves, especially in new developments, some of the subdivisions, we've heard from residents that they don't feel that it's safe for their children to walk to school. There's a campaign with the Brant Health Unit right now to get kids to walk to school, and that's with our Community Services Department. But what we can do in the OP is actually make a framework for complete communities and walkable neighborhoods to make it safe to walk or bus or to bike, and that's through supportive neighborhood design for schools. Also to have schools and the community uses like those recreation facilities beside each other. Also the greening of schoolyards. So those are some of the things that we can do. And in terms of sports facilities, our community services and recreation facilities look at that, and that's part of the actual charges that we have, the development charges that come in that actually build those facilities. So that's part of the next phase, and we're in the OP, we're going to have a lot of recreation facilities that address those needs. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Jennifer. So let's talk a little bit about affordable housing. There have been a few questions about that. And Jessica, I know that's something that's of great interest to you in an area that you do some work in. Somebody has said that some of the OP directions talk about encouraging affordable housing throughout the county. And they're saying, will there be more specific policies and ways to accomplish this within the official plan? Jessica?
Thanks, Glenn, and that's a great question. I do love to talk about affordable housing. So through the new official plan, as we continue to develop the detailed policies and looking to towards the end of July, we will be bringing more detailed policies forward to address specific targets, objectives, and goals for the County of Brant specifically with respects to affordable housing. I know that it's an important topic in our community. It's an important topic to residents. And we also will be looking to, like I mentioned earlier, address some of the work that's already been undertaken by our joint servicing provider, which is the City of Brantford. Some important work and a ton of details have been collected and analyzed through their work with the Housing Master Plan and some other projects as well, like the Mayor's Joint Task Force. So we are looking to those details to kind of lend themselves to developing the more detailed policies, and we'll continue to work to bring those details forward to the residents in July, as well as council.
So Jessica, let me ask you a related question that's come in. Somebody has said that they're aware of other municipalities that are using inclusionary zoning to require or to facilitate affordable housing. Is that something they're interested in knowing? Is that something that the county is looking to incorporate within your new official plan?
Sure. So another great question. And yes, inclusionary zoning is definitely a term that's being readily discussed at this particular time. It's one of the tools in the toolbox that you can use to create affordable housing and to direct new development to provide affordable housing. There are some important details that link to developing policies for inclusionary zoning, such as developing market assessment plans that need to be updated every 5 years and ensuring that the targets that we develop are consistent with our goals, our objectives, as well as our housing market. So it is a consideration. It's something that we're reviewing as part of the new official plan, but it is just one of the tools that we're reviewing. And we are looking at a number of different tools, of course, to make sure that we can accommodate affordable housing. Again, we know it's important. It's definitely something that needs to be included throughout all of our communities throughout the entire County of Brant. So it will be a consideration going forward for sure.
Thank you, Jessica. Let's get Michelle back in. There's some interest in climate change, and I know that that was touched on in the presentation. But more specifically, Michelle, somebody's wondering how the new OP will address greenhouse gas emissions specifically. Is there anything you can share on that topic?
Thank you, Glenn. As I spoke to in our presentation, a lot of part of climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions is protecting our natural areas and our rural areas. So providing permanent protection of woodlands. Currently right now, the test is no negative impact. So is that 1 tree, is it 10 trees, is it 500 trees? So we're looking to go towards stronger protection like the growth plan and not permitting development and protecting those areas. And when you're dealing with perhaps not significant features that aren't protected under the provincial policy statement, but that do relate, if you look at the provincial policy, it does speak to the mitigating impacts of vegetation. So when we're dealing with individual trees or vegetation as part of development, trying to integrate those as part of the design. Another key aspect of greenhouse gas emissions is truck traffic. So locating any new employment uses near the 403 so that the trucks aren't going through the urban area, that they're not stopping, and reducing those emissions. As part of the official plan, it will talk about developing a strategy, conducting inventories on greenhouse gas emissions. Developing a strategy is a much larger process. It needs consultation, it needs research. And it will be conducted outside of the official plan, but the official plan will kind of set the stage for such a strategy. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Michelle. Let's go back to Jennifer. Jennifer, there's a short and sweet question here, and it is as follows. What changes are being proposed for cash in lieu for Parkland, if any? You're muted. Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
That's a good question. So in terms of the actual changes, so if I could back up to answer that question in its entirety. So there's a bunch of changes to the Planning Act. If you remember, it was called Bill 108, and it actually changed a component through Bill 108 called the Community Benefits Charges, and that relates to the types of parkland dedication that a municipality can use in terms of hard or soft services and the way that we charge them through the development charges. So the big answer is that the county itself is re-looking at the way that we actually charge for parkland dedication. We don't have a cash in lieu parkland dedication bylaw yet, and that's one of the issues. So in terms of changes, well, we need to have one in its essence. But for the actual parks planning, we're looking at changing that because we have to update the OP to match Bill 108 and the community benefits charges. That's the number one thing. Make the parkland cash in lieu dedication bylaw, but also modernizing our policies just in terms of parkland dedication, and because not all development sites have parks. So it's the way that the province has laid out the new framework, and we just have to be consistent with that new framework is really what we're going to. So not huge changes, just updating it and making it better.
Thanks, Jennifer. This next question might be a better one for the transportation master plan rather than the official plan, but let me ask it anyway, and maybe Brandon, you're best to jump in on it. Somebody is asking whether the county has looked at adding a bicycle lane to Governor's Road East or Highway 2. Is that something that anyone on the team is aware of? Brandon, are you able to comment on that?
Thanks for that question. I think it's a little particular for the official plan, something likely that can be addressed through the transportation master plan. But kind of as a high level comment, we're definitely looking at more opportunities for active transportation connections. Biking is a perfect example of them, whether that be kind of the on-street bike lanes or even separated ones, keeping in mind safety. And connectivity. I'm lucky enough to have some relatives in the Netherlands, so I've been able to kind of do the biking thing over there, and we have a lot to learn from them, but not necessarily that it could all apply in the county, but I'm sure the transportation plan master plan will give us some more details about that. But it's definitely something that the official plan will look to support.
Thank you, Brandon. Let's get Michelle back in here. Michelle, there's a question about how the OP will be connected with, will be integrated with, will be merged with possible Greenbelt expansion into Brant County. What can you tell us about that?
Thank you, Glenn. Great question. I think at this time we have to wait and see what happens with growing the Greenbelt. Are the policies going to remain the same? Is the area going to remain the same? I can say a lot of the policies that they're very similar to Greenbelt plan that we are developing. Currently, we have the growth plan, and outside of natural areas, it provides for the permanent protection of natural features, surface water features as well. A lot of the policies are the same. The Greenbelt also talks about better protection of our agricultural area, specific policies on preventing fragmentation through lot creation. So a lot of what county staff, we have heard those concerns from residents, and as part of our policy directions, we are looking at reducing fragmentation and a lot of policies that would be similar with the Greenbelt plan. So I do anticipate that if it is approved, I don't think that depending on how the policy directions proceed and the draft official plan and the final plan, that not many changes would actually be required.
So another one for you, Michelle, someone has asked, or I believe it's best put to you, someone has asked, can we also consider agricultural/rural heritage conservation districts? And they have said that they believe there is one near Ayr.
Thank you again, Glenn. So prior to working at the county, I did work at the township of North Dumfries. There were over 400 listed and designated properties. So heritage was very much a part of my daily job. And just northwest of the village of Ayr, there along the Nith River, there's a kind of a rural, it's kind of like a rural settlement, a hamlet. Along the Nith River, it has large lots, it has a Goldie mill from the Goldie family, it has a lot of unique heritage buildings. And that conservation district is very specific to that area. It actually looks at natural heritage, the form and function of development, ensuring setbacks that are compatible. So it is the first heritage conservation district that they did develop, and it's a great tool. It sets out great guidelines. And certainly as we move forward through the official plan and determining how best to protect our heritage, we will reach out to residents and find out where are our priority areas, and that can certainly include the rural areas.
Thanks, Michelle. Let's get Jennifer back in here. There's a question about the EA for the Canesville servicing. What can you tell us about that? What's the status and so forth?
All right, thanks, Glenn. Well, that's a project that's being undertaken by our operations division. The notice of commencement was out last year, and they are working on it, and they've had some meetings, and I know that they were scheduling a public open house sometime later this spring or in the summer. So it's still in its technical stage right now, so there's no actual study to actually review right now. But those who are interested on Engage Brant, you can look it up, and they have all the environmental assessments and current projects, and also on the county's website you can get on the mailing list, or contact us as staff if you have any more questions.
Thank you. Brandon, let's go back to you. Someone has asked, will there be policies for existing agricultural lands that have single detached housing to be converted to rural residential? Is that something being considered as part of the OP?
That's a great question, and one actually we hear very frequently in our development planning world as well. The direction of our province and of our identity here in the County of Brant as very rural based is that we are not going to be directing residential growth to those areas. So if there's existing houses on farm properties or kind of existing clusters, those will obviously have some rights that they would enjoy and they would continue to enjoy. But this new official plan will start to get away from the rural residential severance ability and away from kind of recommending that fragmentation of that land. And part of the purpose of that is while we know obviously living out in the country is a great thing to be able to do, there are quite a few lots that are out there already. And I'm sure we could make hundreds more if we wanted to, but a lot of that comes with a cost. And a lot of that cost is the impact it has on our agricultural areas. So it's something that we're definitely looking at, that kind of compatibility between the residential and the agricultural. There won't be any kind of conversions, or at least recommended conversions that way. And there'll definitely be policies to kind of address existing uses, as well as encouraging newer agricultural uses in those areas. But the key will be that a lot of our residential growth will be directed more to settlements, and away from kind of the one-offs out in the country.
So Brandon, let me put another one to you. Someone has asked, will the new official plan include policies for home-based businesses and small-scale startups? And they've gone on to say it would be nice to have different options for businesses that might be smaller or that are just starting out. So are you imagining anything in the OP that would speak to those issues?
Yeah, and actually within our current official plan, we do have some opportunities for home-based businesses, and they're reflected in our zoning bylaw as well. And we're actually doing a pilot project with our friends in Strategic Initiatives. So our development planning folks in Strategic Initiatives are looking at a pilot project for home-based businesses. And it's something that we're kind of exploring in advance of the official plan, to see what kind of small businesses and small incubation areas we can promote. And understanding too that COVID has really impacted how business works, especially local business. So we're looking at some more flexibilities that way. And I can definitely see the successes of that program that's coming forward being tied into our official plan, and even taking it a step further to work with our strategic initiatives folks about community hubs and business employment lands that have some areas for kind of that incubation of smaller businesses, so that they can eventually branch out.
Thank you. So just a heads up, everybody, we were looking tonight to go to about 8:45, which is about another 17, 18 minutes from now. We'll want to leave 5 minutes or so to talk about next steps and what's upcoming. So we'll probably spend about another 10 minutes or so on questions. And I know we've got a number of them in the queue, so let me consider to pose them. And I just want to thank all of you for the very thoughtful and very purposeful questions. Thank you very much for asking and for sharing them. I know that more than you are benefiting from the answers, so thank you for that. Jessica, back to you. There's another question around affordable housing, and someone is asking, could we consider a new policy that would allow large employers or employment companies, it says, to provide affordable dollar or affordable housing for employees on their lands that are gauged, or I guess, tied to employee earned income as it relates to set rents? There's a lot in there, but I think you got the intent, Jessica. Go ahead, please.
Sure, thanks, Glenn. And that's a great question. There's some really great thoughts in there. So I think this one is more geared to what we refer to as attainable housing. And that's housing to meet the current market need and respect the current wage and income of those within the community. So when we talk about employment and the relationship to housing, it's really about developing a relationship between employment opportunities and balancing that out with equitable opportunities for housing directly within the community to alleviate commuting, give everyone a choice of housing at different affordable rates, whatever that might look like. And so as far as actually providing housing within an employment designation, that can be a bit tricky. It's actually discouraged in the provincial policy framework. But what we could look at doing is building that relationship to closely reflect and ensure that attainable housing is reflected in the County of Brant's housing market throughout the County of Brant, and ensure that all ages, incomes are reflected in our housing that we're providing, and ensuring that people can actually afford to live and work within the community.
Thank you, Jessica. So Brandon, let me maybe get you back for this next one. And it's a question about community character and building the kind of communities we want. Someone has asked, is it too late to develop the north or the south end new developments as secondary downtown? So that's the first part of the question. And the second part is, they're interested in creating walkable neighborhoods with Main Street commercial instead of strip malls and sidewalk destinations and so forth. So is that something you're looking at? Is that within the realm of possibility?
Great question. There's a lot to that. I'll start by saying it's never too late. Planning is something that, and development is something that keeps going. We see redevelopment and intensification and all those kind of beautiful things happen. Change happens, whether it's good or bad, but there's always the way to kind of impact it to make it good. And I do think that suggestion is quite interesting. We do have a very good downtown in Paris, and as a lot of our villages do. They're thriving, there's a lot of businesses there. And one of the worries is that if you create opportunities like that in other places, especially nearby, that those other businesses would suffer. And so that's definitely something that we would have to look at, and balancing those types of uses and where they would be located. But that being said, we have kind of the downtown area in Paris, and then there's kind of the old upper town area along Dundas Street. And then some of these newer subdivisions, they do have those larger commercial plazas where they can offer some amenities there. And that's where it comes down to community design. So the second kind of part of that question, creating those walkable communities, mixing in those uses, the idea of bringing back the corner store, right? Being able to walk a couple meters away to grab a coffee, or if you need to pick up your prescription from the pharmacy. It's not necessarily that it creates a new downtown, but it creates an area where those amenities are available. And that is definitely something that we're looking at with the policies of this new official plan. And you'll see it especially with the idea of our complete communities framework, and really pushing for kind of comprehensive design. You'll hear that over and over, comprehensive design of the new subdivisions. And that will come into play into some of the older ones too. And I say older, but I mean ones that have been developed recently as well. If there's things we can do to tweak stuff in the future, whether that be 10, 15, 20, 30 years, there's always opportunities for that. One of the nice things about our official plan, like a lot of our planning documents, is that it's a living document. And we review it every so often. So as things change, we can come back and revisit that.
Thanks, Brandon. Let's get Jennifer back in for a few questions. Jennifer is asking how or where can they learn more about plans for shared infrastructure, that is infrastructure that is shared with other municipalities?
Oh, that's actually a very good question, Glenn. Thanks for whoever asked that. So there's a couple things when you talk about infrastructure. It's either the hard services like transportation, or the water and wastewater we usually look at. So I guess I'll start with water and wastewater. A couple things the county has, like I mentioned before, we've got the Brant-Brantford Boundary Adjustment Agreement, which is mostly focusing on the Keensville area and the amount of servicing that Brantford will be providing. We've also got Airport Oak Hill area, which also in terms of some wastewater servicing and also water in terms of the connection, since it's like right on the boundary of each other. And also in terms of Mount Pleasant, and also the water connection and some agreements that are happening there in the next 10 years. So a lot of that information is available on our website if it's a study that's ongoing. Or the City of Brantford, also their new official plan has just been completed. It's very comprehensive, it's very well done by the planning team there. So you can go on Brantford's website and see their new OP. In terms of the transportation network, we are working with the City of Brantford. We have a joint transportation plan that we're doing with them. So that's a big, interesting assignment, and it's working together with both transportation master plans. They're ahead of us because they're finished. Ours is underway. We're also working in terms of transportation with the Greater Golden Horseshoe Transportation Plan with the MTO, and also Metrolinx in terms of transit planning to 2051 to 2071. So there's all those plans, and a lot of that information is again on the county's website under Engage Brant, or you can look it up just by the search. Thank you.
And you were just touching on it, Jennifer, but somebody was asking specifically about the transportation master plan. Is there anything more you want to say about what the county is doing right now in terms of developing it? And I know it's not your project, but is there anything you can share about where it's at and how it's dovetailing and fitting with the work you're doing?
Absolutely, and actually it is sort of the planning team's project in a way. We're part and parcel with the Transportation Master Plan. So that actually had a public open house online in March. You can go on Engage Brant and look at the actual slides, and it lays out exactly what's in the TMP. One of the deliverables that the TMP has, and actually had conversation with our operations department today. They are providing the draft transportation schedules for the OP. It will have the road networks, it'll have the active transportation, several other schedules, and also the policies, transportation and mobility they will providing. So it's coming. The TMP itself, the details will be later on in this year. I know there's been a question about where's the bridge, other traffic related like the bike lane on Governor's Road. The TMP will be answering those questions later on in the year, but the policy framework will be available with the draft OP. So great question.
Yeah, these have been terrific questions. And in fact, let's try to shoehorn in a few more before we talk about next steps and wrap things up. Someone is asking about migrant farm workers, and maybe Jessica and or Brandon want to jump in on this one. The question is, how will Brant County plan for better housing for migrant farm workers and for on-farm help? Jessica, do you want to start us off, and we'll see if Brandon has anything to add?
Sure, Glenn. And yeah, another great question. So our new official plan will be looking at flexible housing options throughout the County of Brant. So flexible housing options to incorporate within our more urban areas, but also our more rural areas as well. And that's going to be some of our main focus and some of the main challenge. We've started to develop these types of policies, more flexible housing options in 2020. We released some policies outside of the new official plan process to incorporate additional residential units, or ARUs as they're referred to in acronyms. So these are types of solutions that we can actively incorporate. They're fairly easily incorporated, and it provides a number of different housing options for county residents to be able to incorporate either rental components on their property, seasonal housing on their property, as well as also multi-generational family structures. We will look to continue to develop flexible housing policies going forward. And we do realize that some tweaks need to be made to the existing ARU policies. That's definitely not lost on us. And we're always working to continue the policies that we create, as Brandon mentioned. But I'll let him jump in to see if he has anything further to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, the only, I guess, further point I'll add to that is we do have permissions in our zoning bylaw right now that speak directly to that type of use for farm labor housing on agricultural properties. We are in the process of updating a lot of our agricultural related policies to make them line up a little more with the provincial policies. And that will be one of the things that we're looking at probably in advance of the official plan as well, to be honest, but definitely with the new zoning bylaw as well. And that will look directly at kind of the impact on agricultural land, the need for the workers, like with that farm operation, the extent of that, and their need either to service their own property or to help out with other farming. And we'll kind of take all of those things into account to make sure that there's that ability there for that safe and flexible housing when it's needed, for sure.
So let's get two more questions in quickly. And Brandon, this next one I think goes back to you. It's about agricultural lands. Somebody's asking, with regard to preservation of agricultural lands, will the OP include some kind of flexible mechanisms that would enable agricultural zoned lands to be reconfigured? with built structures such as a house, a shed, and so forth, where there is no net loss of ag land, but that would include new structures. And they've gone on to say, ideally, there would be flexibility that enables modernization of the ag lands while fully supporting the OP goals of preserving ag lands. So your response?
That's a fantastic question. And so we are doing quite a bit of background work with our agricultural kind of analysis of the lands, agricultural lands. And one of the things we will be looking at specifically is kind of the class of the lands as well. And as this person has mentioned, we do want to obviously provide that flexibility to our farming community, especially in light of kind of the economic situation right now. So yeah, yes, that kind of flexibility will definitely be built into the official plan and into future implementation tools as well. And I think that's a very interesting point about reconfiguring the land and making sure that, like they say, there's no net loss to the land, but if there's needs for updates to the farming operation, kind of as an agricultural use, ag related, or even as an on-farm diversified use with something maybe a little businessy or more industrial for processing, there will definitely be those kinds of options highlighted through the new official plan and again through the zoning bylaw afterwards.
Okay, so I promised one more question, and it's a simple, well, deceptively simple one. It's short, but quite broad in scope. And Jessica, I think I'll ask you to respond to it and have the last word. Someone is simply asking, how will the county ensure, how will the new OP help ensure that communities are complete?
Sure, thanks, Glenn. And I'm happy to answer the last question of the evening here. So the county will work to ensure that communities are complete by, again, going back to developing flexible policies to create more housing opportunities. I think there's bits and pieces from every topic that we've chatted about tonight that interrelate to building healthy and complete communities. But there's definitely some different tools, again, that we can build into our implementation policies through our new official plan to create options to assist with, for instance, creating block plans and ensuring that we have good neighborhood design. Brandon mentioned that planning is always evolving, it's always changing, and our documents need to evolve and change with it. And so looking at areas that have the potential for redevelopment, infill, intensification, these are all different policies that we're going to have to work to reflect in a flexible manner, in a creative manner in our new official plan, and ensure, of course, that we're taking into consideration how it properly incorporates the County of Brant values and our unique character and charm as well, because we've also heard back that that's very important, and we do agree. So I hope that answers the question going forward. It'll be through a multitude of different policies that interrelate with transportation as well, infrastructure, protecting what we value with respect to our natural heritage systems, and also protecting agricultural land systems, building in good policy structure for our rural lands as well.
Thanks, Jessica. So we're starting to bump up against 8:45, and we didn't want to go too much beyond that. So we'll look to wrap things up shortly. Just before I invite Brandon to come back and describe next steps and some of the ongoing opportunities for engagement, I wanted to thank everyone again for participating, and a special thank you to those who shared your questions and your comments. They were very insightful, very on point, very purposeful, and very much appreciated by the team. I'd also again like to thank all of our elected officials who've joined us this evening, both for their interest in tonight's topic, and I know they're very interested in it, but also for their ongoing valued service to the community, which is greatly appreciated as well. And from my perspective, it's been a real pleasure facilitating this session with such a thoughtful, knowledgeable, and articulate group. So thank you for the privilege of doing so. Now, I'll be back in a moment to wrap things up, but first over to Brandon to kind of recap next steps and where things go from here, including, again, opportunities to be further engaged in the process, from surveys to future sessions and so on. Brandon, go ahead, please.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Glenn. So just quickly, the policy direction, as we've kind of mentioned over and over, is very kind of high level approach with our official plan. Our draft official plan is coming very quickly. You'll see that there's quite a bit to do still to pull together for that draft official plan. We'll be looking at the settlement area boundary expansions, those requests. We'll be doing more and more consultation and engagement. So like we say, if you have questions or comments that you want considered with this plan, send them in to us, contact staff. Officialplan@brant.ca is usually the best way, but there's a multitude of other ways. Engage Brant, for example, has a number of engagement opportunities on it. But the next steps will be this July 29th meeting of council, where we'll present the draft official plan. And when we say that we're presenting the draft official plan, it's not by any means complete. You'll get the document to have a look at, but it opens that 90-day engagement process again. We send it off to the province, but we're still chatting with you. So we'll be doing more follow-up once that draft official plan does come out. You'll see some summer or late summer, early fall kind of events before we head to the end of the year, where we can chat more specifically about comments and questions with that draft official plan. We're just trying to provide as much of a high-level summary of it as possible so that when you get the document, you don't necessarily have to read the whole thing if you don't feel like it, but we do encourage that. It's obviously a very important document for the County of Brant, so we are looking very forward to presenting this draft and moving forward to that July 29th meeting. And so with that, we'll ask that you save the date for that meeting and tune into the council meeting for that. So we'll be presenting that draft. The municipal comprehensive review will also be there. So there'll be lots more information. And if you do want to stay attuned to that, I would suggest signing up for our email updates. So if you go to brant.ca/planning projects, check the official plan box. We'll send you a monthly email about it. I think we have about 250 residents on there already. So if you're not, spread the word to your friends and join it yourself. And with that, I'll hand it back to Glenn to finish off.
Thanks, Brandon. So everybody, just give me 60 seconds here. Further to what Brandon was saying about further involvement in the initiative, I encourage you, if you have the time, if you are so inclined, to please take the opportunity to continue to share your perspective and to provide input on a number of important topics. And again, there are multiple opportunities to do so through Engage Brant and so forth. So please do visit the county's website if you have not done that already, and take a little bit of time to go through the material there. I think you'll find it very helpful. So lastly, thank you to all for the job done this evening. Thank you to the team for the presentation and for responding to all of the very insightful questions. Thank you to the technical and other personnel who made this session possible. And most of all, thank you to all of you for your participation, without whom this meeting wouldn't make much sense. So please enjoy what's left in the rest of your evening. I'll now formally adjourn the session. Take care, stay safe, and good night, everyone.